सभी को नमस्कार। हमारा हेरिटेज साइट्स का ये आज का जो सत्र है उसके लिए मैं आप सभी का स्वागत करता हूं। और सत्र के शुरू में ही मैं ये बताना चाहता हूं कि अभी तक जो असाइनमेंट्स दिए गए हैं वो असाइनमेंट्स कुछ लोगों ने पूरे करके ईमेल किया है। और जैसे हमने बताया था, असाइनमेंट्स इज फॉर आवर पर्पस, नॉट फॉर कि जो सिखाने वाले हैं उनको इसमें से कुछ नया मिलेगा या वो उससे कुछ सीखना चाहते हैं। इट्स नॉट द पर्पस ऑफ दिस असाइनमेंट्स। तो हम ये कोशिश करें कि इस असाइनमेंट्स को कंप्लीट करते हुए हम अपने पास जो नॉलेज है या हम जो भी सीख रहे हैं उसको हम किस तरह से इम्प्लीमेंट कर सकते हैं, इसके लिए असाइनमेंट्स है। सो आई रिक्वेस्ट टू ऑल ऑफ यू दैट if possible please complete it and send on email id which I already shared in our group. So thank you and मैं सिंधु जी से रिक्वेस्ट करता हूं कि कृपया आज के अपने इस सत्र की हम शुरुआत करें।
Shukriya sir. Namaskar to all of you. I will start by sharing the set. Is the screen visible to all of you?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. As we move forward in our sessions, today's session, the fifth session, will focus on conservation process. And here we will look at divergent conservation approaches, methods, and a couple of techniques used to conserve heritage sites. And then we will also learn about causes of decay in in cultural properties precisely. And then we will look at documenting heritage property with certain strategies and stages of important. As always, let's quickly take a recap of what we did in the last class. Last class or session was about World Heritage Sites. Here, we started with couple of insights about International Organization for Conservation, where we also learned about intergovernmental agencies like UNESCO, NGOs like ICOMOS and IUCN, how they played a huge role in the process of conservation of World Heritage Sites, their formation, aims and objectives. And also with respect to World Heritage Sites, we try to understand the aim, a couple of important definitions, standards of identifying World Heritage Sites, process of how we make into the list, how we get the designation, and then what are the benefits of getting into the World Heritage Site list. This we did understand with a case study of Abu Simbel, where we understood the relocation of this entire monument in Egypt. This was done miraculously with the help of international assistance by UNESCO. And then we went ahead and also tried to understand management of World Heritage Site. This we looked at Taj Mahal as a case, and we tried to understand what are the issues which are of concern and a couple of mismanagements that has been having adverse effects or impact on the heritage site. And today in this session, the session objective would be to understand the factors that affect the heritage structures, conservation methods, documentation for preparing conservation plan. Let's start with divergent conservation approaches, managing and rehabilitating heritage properties. Now, there are two things: degree of intervention. What should be the intervention limit or degree of intervention? Should it be a short-term or a long-term solution? Should we focus on that? Or what is it? So a couple of things on that. And aim is to actually retain the value and cultural significance. Without forgetting that, let's look at a couple of methods which have been employed over the time with various examples. Starting with indirect conservation. nothing but prevention of deterioration and protecting the cultural property by controlling its environment. When we say controlling environment, it could be internal humidity or temperature, and then preventing agents of becoming active. Here, we again, when the moment we arrest the activity of the agents, we are ensuring the deterioration, ensuring the safety of the structure by the active agents of the environment. Then, of course, the sound maintenance also is very important, where if we follow the procedures based on regular inspection as given by guidelines of conservation, we are again ensuring the property, the security or safety of the property. So you're indirectly trying to preserve the heritage without actually touching the heritage. Hello?
Ma'am, your voice is breaking.
Okay. Are you able to hear it now?
Yes, now it is okay.
Hello? Okay. Certain other ways in which we can do this also is, by measures taking against vandalism or fire, theft, and then regular, housekeeping efforts, cleaning it regularly and maintaining it. So these are some of the measures that we can take hands on without touching the property. Also by checking the, reducing both atmospheric pollution and traffic vibrations, that is carefully, planning our developmental activities or infrastructural activities around the site. When we have to do that, we should be cautious about what could be the adverse effect on the heritage. Particularly with respect to atmospheric pollution and vibration. Let's try and understand this with respect to two case studies. The first one is Hathi Gufa cave. This is in Udaigiri Hills, Bhubaneswar. The inscription on the right that you see, it is Hathi Gufa inscription or elephant cave inscription. This was inscribed by Karavela, the then emperor of Kalinga in India. Now the inscription consists of 7 lines in central western form of Prakrit that is incised in a deep cut Brahmi script on the overhanging brow of the natural cave run that you see here. It is supposed to be the earliest biographical sketches of the king, and therefore it is a very important heritage material for us. So paleographically, the inscription dates from mid 1st century BCE to early 1st century CE. These caves, these rock-cut caves were utilized by Jinnah monastic retreat at that time, as retreats at that time. So that way, this is very important for us. Now the inscriptions is exposed to environment, and then it was getting damaged. So archaeological department did an external extension of sandstone that you can see on the visual to protect the inscription without actually touching the inscription. There is no direct contact with the heritage property here. So an add-on, but it is planned or done in such a way that it is sitting in harmony without actually disturbing the beauty or aesthetics or the significance of the property. It is trying to sit in with a visual integrity intact. So that's what they try to do it here. This is an example for indirect conservation. You don't really touch the heritage, but you try to do something else around it so that the heritage layer is protected or preserved. Look at another example. This is again, a family sculpture. In 1938, Ram Kinkar Baij is a very popular, very well-known, famous sculptor at that time. And this is one of his work. Here, Santal family, this is done, the sculpture is in a very created in a very radical medium, and the subject also is very radical. This is made from cement and laterite gravel. The work depicts actually an Adivasi couple with their two children and dog, possibly returning home after battering their produce at a local market. So it endows these humble lives with a dignity and monumentality traditionally, which was reserved for rich and powerful then. So that way, this becomes very important, and that is something that needs to be preserved and protected. But again, because of its nature of material and that it was exposed to the environment, because it was standing on a lawn beside a street in Shantiniketan's Kala Bhavan. So they had to protect this, but then did not really want to touch the sculpture. So what they did was they kind of, built a canopy over the sculpture as though to shelter. What they did here is, again, they were trying to arrest the deterioration of the structure by arresting the agents of decay. Now here the agent of decay is rain. Because the iron rods which were used as a reinforcement for this, they were exposed to environment and rains, that which was now rusting. So without harming the visual integrity, this canopy was provided, and the sculpture was protected. So again, an indirect way of protecting the heritage. Moving on to the next one, we will look at preservation. Now, preservation means maintaining a place in its existing state and retarding deterioration. Here, we directly deal with the cultural property, unlike the indirect conservation. So we touch the property, we try to do something that could relieve the structural property, or sorry, cultural property from its dust or dirt or whatever it is. So we try to preserve it by applying something on it or trying to recover it back to its original form. With an example, let's try to understand this. Now, this is city of Pompeii. We all know that this was destroyed by nearby volcano, the Mount Vesuvius, which erupted several thousands of years ago. That covered, actually, the entire Pompeii city was covered by this ash of the volcanic debris. This was covered in such a way that, nearly about 6 meters, 19 feet high of debris or volcanic debris kind of covered the city. And that burial, the instant quick burial, actually preserved it for centuries, until the ruins were discovered in the late 16th century. When they discovered it, now it was another way that they had to restore or protect this. And the process of conservation, all of the walls which had these beautiful painted stuccos and very colorful plastered walls, they had to remove the dirt and all the debris from that and clean it so that we could see whatever was available or whatever was there. So they adapted artistic preservation, and then they also adapted structural consolidation, and then went ahead to restore the entire Pompeii city. In the visual, you can see how they are trying to do it. This is again an example of preservation. So the entire process of restoring this involved artistic preservation, structural consolidation, which we will learn in next few slides, and then restoration. So this again is showing the Pompeii city today. The ancient frescoes, jewelries, and Greco-Roman god, they're all among the unexpected discoveries that archaeologists made, during a renovation effort to shore up the Italy's ancient city of Pompeii. Now let's try to understand the next method, This is consolidation. Now, physical addition or application of a adhesive or supporting material into the actual fabric. Again, it is a direct conservation technique where you're trying to deal with the material directly. So if it is a fabric or a painting, you try to use adhesive, and then you try to bring those two together in such a way that you retain the structural or the fabric layer as it was before. This is done usually to ensure the continued durability of or a structural integrity. So we try to understand consolidation with again, another example. This is Roman theater, Sangucho. This actually has a history. This was renovated and restored prior to all the conservation rules and things like that. And what they did was a very bad job. They actually, they did not manage to keep the significance and values and the integrity of the site, unfortunately. So they had to relook at this site. Now, when we say consolidation, it refers to stabilization of degraded or weak areas by introducing new material that can hold them together, which is capable of holding them together. As a treatment intervention, paintings conservators generally use adhesives, like I said. When it comes to the structure, it's slightly different. The treatment of isolated area of paints and things like that are lifted when you're talking about the paintings and even the text fabric, if you have to say. But we use another technique for structural consolidation. This is what I was talking about when we're trying to do with a painting. Here, the loose fragments of mural paintings, they try to inject these adhesives in such a way that, the older one or the broken part or the cracked part, they come together, and therefore, they kind of stitch the entire painting together, and then clear the debris and go to the next process of cleaning it and things like that. So consolidation become the early step or first step to, when you're doing a restoration of any either painting, art piece, or a building also for that matter. This is a Baroque art piece. Many of the historical structures, they have composite walls built, wherein two faces of masonry, while core is filled with rubble and mortar. Over the time, these voids develop in the core, and they kind of make way for water seepage. When the water falls on the structure, these gaps allow the water to seep in, and then slowly they kind of they appear on the surface of the wall. And when this continuously happens, the structure kind of becomes very weak. So you see cracks on the surfaces of heritage buildings. That is when, again, you go for consolidation. So consolidation of structures is generally done through grouting, a process called grouting, which stabilizes, the core walls. And the grouting is also done for plasters, like we did it in the paintings. For plasters also, this method is done where they inject the grouting material, and they kind of fix it together or bring them together. Now, grouting within the wall becomes very important because, like I said, it allows seepage and the structure becomes very weak. The basic grouting method kind of helps to fill these voids and strengthens the structure. Whenever the traditional methods are inadequate, we are allowed to use modern method of grouting, which most of the conservation architects use today, but it should be reversible. That is one of the ethic point, if you recollect. So grouting materials should be compatible with the historical layer that we are, looking at. Grouting material generally, should set very slowly. That's the key of selection of grouting material. So when do you do this actually? When do you decide to do grouting or consolidation for structures? Now this is decided when you know that elements has been reduced, that it no longer sufficient enough to meet the future hazards. That is, the wall is in almost crumbling stage when it cannot take any more of these external has damage. That is when you try to strengthen the wall. Until then, you try and avoid or preserve it as it is. You do the preservation. So let's move ahead and see some more ways in which this is another structure of Hampi, which actually is waiting for restoration. Now, what is restoration? This is again a process of conservation. This is to revive the original concept of the object or cultural property. That is, returning a place to a known earlier state by removing accretions. Sometimes it could be debris, sometimes it could be other developmental ad hoc developments around the heritage site. So they all need to be removed so that you bring back that pristine quality and pristine situation what it was in the early times. So that it resembles and the same way it was before. All the other external elements are removed. They're all without introduction of new material, you try to restore them. That means you don't add on, you don't reconstruct, or you don't put anything extra. All you have to do is clean up the place and make sure that whatever is broken or whatever damages has happened to the structure, you try following certain techniques or methods to bring them back together and to its original way that it was. So that is the restoration. We all know that in 1672, Bahmani rulers vandalized most of the sculptures after the fall of Vijayanagara Empire. But frankly speaking, today's tourists also are no less. They too have done their share to blemish the historic city. They have also tampered. For example, in the last slide, the musical pillars which are there in the temple, they're all often touched and by the people, visitors, and it stopped producing the similar music that it used to be earlier. So this is again, a testimony that, for vandalism. So there's a Queen's Bath in Hampi. What you see here is actually a restored photograph after restoration. What had happened was the walls were all damaged and they had the plasters coming off. They were all decayed and they were coming off. And they also had a couple of parapets which were all broken, and the masonry walls were all leaking. These were some of the issues which they identified, and decayed plasters were carefully scrappled and replastered. The parapets which were broken, the broken parapets, they were reconstructed using bricks of old patterns which were all rescued from the ruins, the heap of ruins prior to this. And then masonry walls were all strengthened by grouting. So the entire restoration process involved consolidation through grouting. They also, these lintels in the temple, actually, the Virupaksha temple, the lintels were all broken. The lintels and the beams, they were all broken. And also, some of the lintels were coming off and they were hanging. So they tried to fix it back with stitching and underpinning from inside. So that was one of the method used. And masonry props were all given externally, as though to support after this restoration. And then they also replastered, like I said. So these were some of the methods that they adopted to restore, to bring back the heritage building as it was before. So that entire process of bringing back to its original condition is restoration. And we also look at other interesting adaptive reuse or rehabilitation. What is this? Adaptive reuse is the act of finding a new use for a building, and a process by which structurally sound older buildings are developed for economically viable new uses. In fact, the best way of preserving any building is to keep them in use. Adaptive reuse often is the only way that historic and aesthetic values can be actually saved for economically and historical buildings brought up to contemporary standards. So they are economically viable also. The recycling of buildings, has long been an important and effective historic preservation tool. It initially developed as a method of protecting historically significant buildings from demolition. So it all started from there. The moment a historical building is demolished, then the heritage is lost. So how to protect that? The first step is to bring some kind of a use which is compatible and try to use the building and not let the building defunct. The moment it is defunct, then it is going to deteriorate because of the neglect and vandalism and so on. Therefore, this is one of the interesting and economically viable, step towards conservation, method of conservation, actually. So with the example of Tate Modern Gallery, which is there in UK, this was actually iconic power station and built in two phases in 1947 and 1963. This was designed by Gilbert Scott then. It considered it consisted of a stunning turbine hall that you can see in the visual itself, which was about 35 meters high and 152 meters long, with the boiler house alongside, and a single central chimney that is very obvious in the visual. However, apart from a remaining operational London electricity substation, the site actually was redundant. It was not really used since 1981. So what they did, the huge machineries were all removed, which was there in the site, and the building was stripped completely of its, the surface clothing, and it was stripped back into its original steel structure and the brickwork. After that, the turbine hall became a very dramatic entrance to the entire locality, like as a display area, and the boiler house became a gallery. So they started using this building, gave a new look in terms of use. And once this was done, actually, it became one of the UK's top 3 tourist attractions. So they not only reused the heritage property, but also they made the best of their economical opportunity. So that way, adaptive reuse is one of the interesting economically viable solutions and the way of conservation. We may not be able to do to all of the buildings this, but a majority of the buildings we can think about reusing and adaptively rehabilitate those old structures. The next is reproduction. Reproduction entails copying an extent, whatever is existing, an artifact or a part of the structure or a building, like a motif. So this is often in order to replace something which is missing or decayed parts, generally decorative. It is not really structural elements. You don't really do this for a supportive column, let's say. You generally adapt this method or technique for decorative motifs, repetitive motifs that can be easily reproduced and placed in such a way that it manages to keep intact the aesthetic harmony of the heritage property. So here is an example. This is Shalabanjika and Sanchi Stupa. We all know that great Sanchi Stupa was built in 3rd century, and it contained the relics of Lord Buddha. Now Stupa also has 4 tornas or gateways in 4 cardinal directions. Now all the 4 cardinal directions Toranas have these very beautiful sculpture Shalabanjikas, bracket figures on the gateways. The reliefs of Sanchi Stupa from the most important visual record of life and architecture in Shunga period. So that is the relevance and importance. One of the earliest Buddha sculptures from Indian context, this is actually preserved in British Museum collection since 1842. So that is missing. The image is usually of a woman, you see there, women and sculptures standing near the tree and having stylish feminine features, holding a branch or something. So the word Madanika and Shila Balika is often used down south. You get to hear those names. Very similar to that. Now this, the valuable cultural property is being damaged invariably or is threatened by its environment. So it may have to be moved to a more suitable environment. So what do you do then? In its place, then a reproduction is substituted. And that reproduction is substituted in order to maintain the unity of the site or the building. And that is what is done here also. So the actual is kept in a museum or in a more conducive environment, and a duplicate or a reproduced ornament exactly in a very similar way is produced and is fitted in such a way that it keeps the visual content intact. So this is one of the methods. This also is done, when the part, the part which we are trying to reproduce is really going through a severe deterioration because of the environment, and it is threatened. Only then you do this. Then we come to the last one. Of course, reconstruction, we have discussed Warsaw example extensively. Now, reconstruction of historic buildings and historic centers using new materials, this may be necessitated by disasters such as fire, earthquakes, or war. And Warsaw case, it was because of the war. And reconstruction may also be appropriate as part use or practice that retains the cultural significance of the place. So that is very essential. When you do a reconstruction, you have to have the content as it is intact. We have to have a reference document which will help us to reconstruct. It is not really done on an assumption. It must be based upon some accurate documentation and evidence. That's very important. Evidence is important. Never upon conjecture, actually. Reconstruction is appropriate when something is totally incomplete or damaged or altered in such a way that it becomes very necessary to reproduce it or reconstruct to bring it back into its early state. That's when you go for reconstruction. And this is the 18th century painting of Warsaw, which was actually used to rebuild the city after the destruction, after the war. And this is one of the sources, but they did it with a thorough documentation. So thorough documentation is very important. Nothing is done as per your whims and fancies. It has to be recorded documentation. So now let's move ahead, and we understood certain ways in which we can deal with conservation techniques and methods to protect the heritage sites. But we should also know about certain threats which are on these structures and sites, which are very common. So external causes of decay, biological and botanical causes, and natural disasters, and most often are man-made causes of decay. Let's try to understand each one of them briefly. External causes of decay is caused by gravity or structural issues caused in foundations or walls, lintels, arches, walls, columns. These are some of the building elements which are often disturbed or forced to decay because of the external causes. Now, with an example, we'll try to understand this. What you see on the visual is Leaning Tower of Pisa. Now here it had twin problem because of for its leaning. Actually, it went on increasing, as the years passed, and that's why it was of concern. So structure was actually subjected to main two reasons. The first being structural failure because of fragile masonry, and second, because it was collapsing due to the breaking up of the subsoil around foundations. So one side of the foundation, the subsoil was very weak, and it was kind of giving away the building. So the tilt was because of that. So of course, a lot of suggestions came in how to go about conservation of this, or how to stop leaning of the Pisa anymore. So that was the concern. So method, of course, they with a lot of deliberations, they came up finally with a solution that they analyzed the structure and the cause, and it was a long, lengthy process that they did over not 1 or 2 years, over several years actually. The process is that long, and then finally, method was soil extraction. They saw engineers, they dug up series of tunnels on the north side of the tower, and they removed small amount of earth. So the tower leans to the south. And with the steel cables, they try to pull it back into the original position. I mean, it may sound very simple, but it is really a very long process. In fact, the total reconstruction was also suggested, or relocation rather. They wanted to rebuild it elsewhere. So even that was suggested. But finally, after all the analysis that they did, structural analysis, and figuring out the causes of the decay, causes of the lean and all of that, they came up with this solution. And finally, I believe it is stopped leaning anymore. The degree, whatever it is there. It is stood there from the restoration of its last restoration, actually. So we'll look at some more climatic causes. Now, climatic causes are the usual, the regular concerns which largely affect all the buildings, but more importantly, the historical buildings. You see sun, UV rays damaging the organic materials like wood. If the wooden constructed temples in South Canara and coastal regions, they're all affected by sun. And also art or heritage properties which have these textile pigments, then they are also affected by sunlight. Now, masonry cracking, this is very common. You see cracks, several cracks running up and running horizontally along the walls and buildings. So this is a regular concern. This is again because of the climate. Then water seepage, groundwater, salt crystallization, all of this kind of really have adverse impact on those heritage structures. This is an example of shore temple at Mahabalipuram, where the shoreline of the north side of the temple is really eroding, and I believe the shoreline has been receding by 4 or 5 meters every year. There is a huge effect of wind onto this building. Shore temple, is also acknowledged for being the first stone structure made by Pallavas. So that way, historically, this building is very, very significant. This is perched on 50 feet high square plinth, where the pyramidal structure rises to the extent of about 60 feet. And this kind of present a typical specimen of Dravida temple architecture. And Shore temple generates an exclusive combination of history and natural splendor, because of the material that was used in construction. So that way, this temple, both culturally and historically, is very, very significant. So what were the solution that were thought for these kind of impact due to climatic causes? PW officials who were trying to look at this, they were trying to suggest groins built with boulders. This was largely to check the waves which rose, for a height of 3 or 4 meters, and the building could not really sustain the shocks caused by wave action. So to arrest that, they were planning some boulders, and make sure that the wave does not really hit the structure as much as it did then. And they were also designed to withstand the waves. So that was one solution that was suggested. And also another important thing here for the structure itself is the salt crystallization. Now these are made up of blocks of granite, and this date back from 8th century. So the construction is without mortar, the construction. So water, what happens is it is sucked in between the joints of masonry. Now as the wind blows, because the speed is very high, they tend to crystallize, within that gap, and they do not allow the moisture to evaporate. So thereby that is trapped inside, and they cause damage to the structure gradually. So this is also of concern. So climatic causes are quite serious on these heritage structures. Moving on, let's look at some more biological and botanical causes. Now you see there a visual, that's Vaikunta Perumal temple, and what you see on the right is bats. Though regularly pujas are done and other rituals are being carried out as per the temple's Agama Shastras, they also do chemical water wash treatment, which is given for the sandstone by ASI once in 2 years or 3 years. You still see these bats. They have their the northern wing, particularly of the cloister. It's den, and the stench from their droppings on the floor really assault the visitors. It's not only a visually bad sight, but also health-wise, it is not really nice, and it is slowly, deteriorating the structure. That particular part is not visible, and then the usual concerns of structure arrives because of this animals or birds, bats. So this is one, and you see the second picture shows the insect attack, how this is also of concern. And on the bottom you see Maluti temples. Now these are group of temples, 72 extant terracotta temples. They are located in Maluti village near Shikaripura, Jharkhand actually. So these are, again, you can see the fungus, molds, lichen, all growing on the building, the roof of the building, you can see. So if you do not check these, then again, the building gets deteriorated and they gradually decay. And of course, natural disasters are again concern for historical sites. There was an earthquake in Nepal in 2015. This was really heartbreaking. The early earthquake was only in, I think, 1934 or something. But this one really had a very bad impact. This destroyed hundreds of historical sites across Nepal. And this is one example where they have tried to restore the stupa here. So you see several pictures. Again, more than 8,000 people were killed in this earthquake. And aftershocks again had damaged several historical sites. This was widespread of destruction. The visuals itself will show. But just going back to this example, actually here, the stupa was restored, and the restoration work actually after around 18 months of earthquake, this was restarted and constructed and completed. And the niceness of this is they did not do it with the government fund, but the money came from donations from Buddhist groups and several volunteers. So that was an interesting fact here, and they kind of did this restoration. And it was recently opened, and it is a very nice historical tourism site now. So moving forward, we look at man-made causes of decay. This is very, very important. We did discuss a couple of things in the yesterday's session. This is again Taj Mahal, where we can actually, there is half Taj Mahal, which there's one visual which I showed with half white and half yellowish. Actually, the pearl white, which was very clear like a Snow White in those 1970s, also we could see Taj Mahal so white. Now it is all overall yellow hue with brown and black and green patches around it. All of this, including the marble used to shine and show different colors, I believe. Pinkish in the morning, dazzling white in the noon, and then golden orange in the evening, and milky white in the night. So those colors were very distinctive when people observed Taj Mahal in 1970s. But now you don't see any of that. The color change is not evident, and obviously because of all these things. And human vandalism is really high. People touch, and the vibrant shine of the sandstone has lost its luster. They're all getting flaked, slabs and cracking, and a lot of breakages that you see. All of this, and most importantly, the concern also are because of the factories and the destruction of Yamuna River. All this is man-created. We have created and led to its destructions in a way. So what we need to really be aware and bothered about is the atmospheric pollution and changes of groundwater level, Yamuna particularly, because the deep foundations, if you don't take care of those Yamuna River, then the Taj Mahal is bound to be affected in a greater way than we can imagine. So that is one. And of course, the control of tourism is also something that is really concerning with this. And these are all man-made causes like alterations or inappropriate repairs. If one does without adhering to the conservation ethics, then again, these improper repairs will lead to not physical deterioration, but the visual, and it will not really protect or preserve the actual values and importance. So that way they affect. And of course, if these structures also are neglected without maintenance and all, then again they deteriorate. So vibration damages, these are again the infrastructure which surrounds these historical structures, they are of concern. The more roads we do, the more tunnels we dug, it all affects the heritage building. Apart from that, thefts and wars also, all of these are man-made causes which lead to the destruction of cultural property. Now, this is another example. What you see on the right is the before and after. This is a shocking news, which came on 21st November 2020. I come from this place, so this became very personal to me. In fact, this was when I was feeling very strongly that I must conduct something, some course which bring in a lot more awareness into people. This is a beautiful Kali Vigraha, which was there, sculpture which was there. This is a Lakshmi temple built by Hoysalas, beautiful one. It has 4 cells, Chaturkuta typology. Of course, they say that it was because of some people wanted to, break open and to try to find a treasure in that. But again, after a lot of check, the idol of goddess Kali, they say that it was not really the people, not vandalism, but it is next thing, that is neglect. The idol was neglected and was not taken care. Sufficient measures to preserve and protect was not done, and therefore it is of this state today. So these are some of the things that we need to be cautious about. Neither neglect nor vandalism will help us protect the structure. So the only way to avoid these two things is to bring more awareness, to bring more local protectors into action. Anyway, moving on, let's look at, again, foremost important point of conservation is how we actually document the heritage property. We need to prepare conservation document. We'll go about three important stages. Now, the first stage is called documentation. Now, here you do investigation, you do measure drawing, you then identify problem, and then you do a condition mapping, and then you evaluate causes for decay. So, what is investigation? Hello. Okay.
Yes.
So can you hear?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So investigation is essentially, preliminary inspection that you do. You do research and you document about all the historical data that you collect to understand the heritage importance of that heritage property. So that is the first step. You investigate and try to find out and collect a lot of information about the structure that you have identified. That's the first step. So then the next step is to do measure drawing. Why do you do a measure drawing? Essentially, to maintain the authenticity of the heritage building, it is very important to actually collect the valuable information on the structure. Now here, building itself is an authentic record of its architecture, isn't it? So building itself is an authentic record, and therefore documenting the building becomes very, very important. So you identify various types of construction system, materials, techniques, all of this in this heritage property. And then you go ahead with the next step, that is inventory of defects. Now here you're trying to understand problem. You're trying to understand the problems of the structure. So what are the various defects that you can notice on the structure, and likewise you prepare a legend of all kinds of defects that you understand. Like you notice a crack, then you write it down, you record it. So what is the extent of the crack, whether it is vertical or horizontal, on which wall is the crack seen. So all those detailed documentation of the defects is made. And you also create a subjective legend, so you understand what you're talking about. And then you do a condition mapping. Now this is again recording the current status of the structure. If there is a column missing, or a lintel broken, beam broken, parapet missing. So all of such things, detailed observation and recording. This is something which is very, very important with the dimensions. The condition mapping is always done with the dimensions. And then you notice everything, like you make an attempt to draw everything, like such as floor, ceiling, internal walls, surfaces, external walls. You do a lot of technical drawings and also identify the defects together. It's a very tedious process, but the most important process in your documentation, the condition mapping, because you are exactly documenting the condition of the heritage for more important reason. Why do you actually do that? Essentially, you need to understand what is the extent of damage and what is the extent of deterioration, whether it is structural deterioration or something that you can tackle by controlling the environment of it or whatever it is. So you need to also calculate quantity of decayed areas, say for plastering, and then you have to identify flaking areas or missing masonry. All of it you need to fill in, right? You need to restore it. So that's the reason why you do these steps. And then finally, you will evaluate the causes of decay and then analyze it. Now, this is the last stage, which will lead you to take further action on that, further decision as to what should be your conservation method. Now, these techniques for documentations can be done in many ways. Like I mentioned, writing notes and observation, making some sketches. So this is a visual survey. You also can take a lot of photographs, close shot, picture shot. So you can do several photo frames to understand and identify the decayed part of in a structure. And then you also do a plaster survey. Now this is largely done when a heritage property has this plaster spilling away and flaking of the surfaces. Then you either use your hand and sort of scrapple the plaster and understand the thickness and a lot of other things. Also, you can use small tools, but largely you should do that without destructing the existing fabric. You do it only in a weaker portion, obvious portions which has come off. So there you test it to understand what is the actual composition of that and all that. So these are some of the techniques that you can use to document your heritage site. Then after this is the second stage. Now, second stage, I call it as action stage, because this is where you actually execute your plan. Now, what you do is you strategize. You prepare a plan, estimation required, time period for the execution. So what is the duration you will need to execute whatever you plan? Either it is a consolidation or it is restoration, whatever it is, what should be the period in which you are going to do that? And then you need to identify required skills for conservation. Do you have people who are aware of the technique and the skill required to conserve this, or restore this? And then you structure your team. You bring in people, say funding person and a technician, a laborer who do the work actually. So you try to create your team. Your team has to be structured. And then you put up a plan for work management. So what happens when, that kind of a thing. Then you phase your conservation. So you will start, say, with cleaning of the site. And then the first thing you do is consolidation. And then you go for, other, say, after consolidating or grouting or whatever method you use to consolidate that, then you try to do the plastering part of the heritage property. So that way you try to phase your conservation. So you will have an idea of how long would be this project. This is not the end of conservation process. Like I always say, conservation is not just an end product, it is a process. So post conservation, you need to evaluate. So you did something. So what happened to the structure? Did it deteriorate further, or is it intact, or is it in the same way that you left it? So these kind of evaluation further. Are you finding some cracks elsewhere in some other wall? Then there must be some other issue. So that way you try to go back to your site to re-evaluate post conservation process. Conservation work. So the third stage actually is continuous. It's a monitoring stage. You keep monitoring the structure to make sure and to maintain it. So these are some of the three important stages that you have to go through if you have to document a heritage property. And now, why are we doing all this? Because there is a very urgent need for us to protect this heritage site in extensive and rapidly growing urbanization around it. So if you have to protect a heritage, it is very, very difficult. The visual here is of Bodhanath Stupa, the early example where we discussed the natural disaster, the same stupa. This remains standing in Kathmandu today. So after its restoration. So this is why we need to do all this tedious process of protecting and conserving heritage as against this growing urbanization. So I think that brings us to the assignment of today. It's again very, very simple. Find an unlisted heritage structure. If you had identified any structure, heritage property in the day one session, then you can actually go back and use the same heritage structure for this assignment as well. it has to be unlisted. It should not be listed under INTAC or as World Heritage Site or anything like that. It should be an unlisted heritage structure, and you prepare an initial inventory based on whatever we discussed today in this session. So simply, you can just be very quick. If you have understood the session, then it's not very difficult for you to do this. You understand the structure with its decay and what you can do to conserve that structure. That's simple enough. So that is something that you can do as today's assignment. And I think that's the end of the session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. It's a very nice presentation, and it's too much need. Yes, Vikramji, you want to ask anything, please?
I have a question. First of all, in this lecture, Madam said that there are several such kind of
some problem is there.
Yeah, there is a problem. There are several structures where at least
your sound is mute, unmute. So please.
It's not mute from my side. It is unmute.
No.
Now, what is the scenario? Can you hear me, ma'am?
Yes, we can hear you now.
You said that further there are some architectural heritage which are taken from the monuments and then further put in the museums. Whenever a particular individual visit a particular site, can he identify whether that is the real thing or that is the replica of the real thing?
May not be. If laymen like us may not be able to identify, it will be identified by only the expertise, because they would have made sure that reproduction is done in such a way that a replica is created is very much similar to the original one. So unless the guide tells you that the original one is in the museum and this is a replica, you will not be able to identify.
At the same time, I want to add one other thing, ma'am. Further, if it is a scenario that further real things are replaced by some other things, maybe it might happen that if I'm a person, I know how to create a particular structure, and there is a further very valuable structure, valuable for the statue is there. I will further create a replica of that and then put that there, and at the same time, I will take the real one and sold it somewhere else. It can also happen, and I think
this has happened. It has happened from the time of 18th century. That is when those acts came into picture. If you recollect my class on day 2, this is where it all started. Exactly what you are talking about. The actual heritage, authentic heritage, was taken away and was exported to some other place. This has happened and is happening. Treasure, yeah.
Treasure hunter.
Yeah. So I think these are something which will not have one word answer again. It is one is we need to respect our heritage, and that comes from within us. We have to bring in awareness in the youngsters that it is something that you do not touch, and that is something that has to stay there and be respected. That is one. And other thing is all the administrative people, they are trying their best to protect them. They have several inspections which go on. Technical experts come look after that. So they have their own procedure to ensure that they're all intact. But despite that, like the example that I showed you of Kali idol, some say that people came searching for treasure, but they may not be true also. But if it is true, then it is a concern, right? Because that temple is supposed to be locked and protected. So if the lock is gone or the latch is gone, then it is not protected, it is not safe. Anybody can enter anytime, and that is when all these kind of mishap happens. So one important thing that I can tell you at this point is that we need to have local protectors. People who live around these heritage sites, they should be educated and they should be responsible for protecting that, apart from the officials who have been formally assigned by the government and other things.
I want to add one more thing, ma'am. In Shimla, we have Indian Institute of Advanced Studies, which is in real sense a prestigious institute in one way or the other, and it is under Archaeological Survey of India. There was a rice bell very early, near about 14 or 15 years back, there was a rice well which was gifted by the Nepalese ruler to the then Governor General of India. I don't know when it was. It was a beautiful structure. And near about, I think in 2004 or 5 or sometime near about that, that particular bell was stolen away. Neither at the same time, there is a security around that. There's a private security, there is a police security. And till date, nobody knows where that particular structure is. And further, at the same time, there were names of very big individuals that these particular persons were involved in that, but nothing happened. When administration and the same time police and local bodies are in mixed with the, they are trying their level best to take away something, then common man cannot do anything.
Actually, you know what?
Watch and we can speak only.
We are also using, very strong visual medias to encourage for such thefts. We have movies. We have movies which are coming up and showing the, thieves as heroes. Unfortunately, that is really giving a very bad message to the youngsters. Really giving a bad message, and they make sure that they show a lot of ways in which that can be done. Also, unfortunately, so young minds they're very smart. They get ideas and they can do it.
Nowadays, that thumbs up ad, no, you can see.
Yeah.
Thumbs up ad, huh? I get so sad when I see that, but I don't know what to do about it. Why nobody is taking objection about it?
Even if somebody had taken, ma'am, it hardly comes into the notice of common people at times. Media covers it up most often.
Yeah, that is the thing. One more thing.
Actually, this thing is very serious because in last some year to find out such type of cases from the state, from the nation, but there is not any single type of documents which give us the complete national database regarding this. So when we asked our state government up to now in this the temples or the historical places, how many antiquities or the artifacts theft and which cases are solved, but there is no such type of any documents with police department or archaeology department. तो इसके लिए उन्होंने ये कहा कि हम ज्यादा से ज्यादा ऐसा कर सकते हैं, पिछले 10 साल में इसका हम आपको ये दे सकते हैं, मगर उसके लिए आर्कियोलॉजी डिपार्टमेंट का एक लेटर आप जो है डायरेक्टर जनरल पुलिस उनके इसको दीजिए, उसके बाद हमारे जो मिनिस्टर है उनसे बात करवाइए, तब हम इस तरह का ये करेंगे। अब मैंने सिर्फ एक ही बात कही थी कि अभी हमने पुलिस डिपार्टमेंट का एक वेबसाइट जो ऑलरेडी है, जिसमें वो हर साल देते हैं कि कितना चोरी हुआ है, कितना बाकी केसेस हुआ है। हमने कहा था कि सिर्फ उसमें एक रो ऐड कर दीजिए, एक पॉइंट ऐड कर दीजिए, हिस्टोरिकल आर्टिफैक्ट्स थेफ्ट, इस तरह का। उसमें फिर मंदिर की चोरी हो, चाहे किसी हिस्टोरिकल या आर्कियोलॉजिकल साइट्स पर से कुछ चोरी होता हो, वो सभी उसमें आना चाहिए। मगर अभी तक ये प्रावधान नहीं किए गए हैं, तो ये कोशिश चल रही है कि इस तरह से एक डाटाबेस बनाए। इसीलिए हमने जो रिक्वेस्ट किया है, मैंने कल भी इसके बारे में ये कहा था कि जितना ये हो सकता है अगर वो मिले तो हम इसकी अहमियत क्या, इसकी सीरियसनेस क्या है, वो गवर्नमेंट को भी ये कर सकेंगे और उसके लिए अवेयरनेस भी हम खड़ा कर सकेंगे।
Actually, in the recent times, there have been a couple of idols returned to us. Rather, we going and finding it out, they have returned, realizing the importance of it to be here. I think one or two examples I will probably discuss.
जब ये आइडल वापस किए गए, सुभाष कपूर का जब ये किस्सा हुआ, आइडल थेफ्ट, जो वो बुक के बारे में भी है, अमेरिकन एजेंसीज ने जो मूर्तियां चोरी हो गई हमें रिटर्न करने की बात कही, तो उसमें भी हमें उन्होंने ये कहा था कि ये आपकी है, इसका कुछ तो भी प्रूफ दीजिए, बट वी हैव नो एनी सच टाइप ऑफ डॉक्यूमेंट्स। तो हमें बहुत सीरियस रूप से ये कार्य करना चाहिए। 1950, 1960 इन दिस 10 years हर गांव में सर्वे हुआ था, उसमें हर चीज, हर आर्टिफैक्ट्स, एंटिक्विटीज का नोटेशन किया गया था, बट वेयर आर दैट ऑल रिकॉर्ड्स टिल नाउ, नो वन न्यू अबाउट दैट। सो अगर हम सब मिलके कोशिश करें तो शायद इसमें कुछ फ्रूटफुल हो सकता है। यस, उर्शाली मैम प्लीज।
Yeah, documentation is very necessary actually.
Yes. I think that's where we lack. I think we take it granted, when you have something in abundance. We have rich heritage and that is in abundance, so we don't really care about it. I think that has to change. We need to start caring about it. It is only then we start documenting it. The moment it is documented, there will be some way that you can hold on to it and protect it and preserve it. It is
Ma'am,
also
one more
something
thing.
for future.
About which Hoysala temple you're talking about now? Kali idol?
Dodda Gadwalli Lakshmi Temple. It is
That
on the way to Belur, Hassan. I
Dodda.
come from that place. My village is very close to Gadwalli, and every time I go for holidays, we visit this temple for sure. It's a beautiful
Yeah.
temple, actually.
Now I will try to visit that. That's what I asked.
Please do, please do. There are so many Hoysala temples which are
Yeah.
not, always spoken about. I'm trying to do a little research on this and perhaps come up with something substantial. Then we may have some other session where we can put up all this across.
Yeah, yeah. I'm visiting all Hoysala temples. This I have not visited, so I thought I will visit and
It is
uh,
on the way to Beluru from Hassan.
Beluru to
Yes,
Hassan.
Prakash, you want to ask something? Prakash, yes, yeah, please. Prakash, you raised a hand. You want to ask anything? If not, then Divyaji, please ask.
Namaste Sindhuji. I also wanted to ask about that Lakshmi temple, which Vrishalaji already asked. I have one more question. You showed us a picture of that Taj Mahal, right? I'm very curious to understand. Is that what was the structure that you that was pictorial below the Taj Mahal structure, below that
That
red
was trying
colored
to
things?
show the layers of the geological layers and the depth in which the foundation has gone. So the
Oh,
underwater,
okay.
they are trying to show below the ground so that the foundations are affected. The moment foundations are affected, then the stability of the structure is in question, right?
Yes, yes. So that is
So that's
there is really that depth of foundation below the Taj Mahal that we don't see.
yes, yes.
Okay, okay. Dhanyawad.
What type of foundation is it there for Taj Mahal?
I'm not really very sure, ma'am. It will be of hard stone foundation itself. I don't have the descriptive details. Actually, India today,
It's the structure of entire monument.
marble.
Yeah.
Because ma'am, nowadays we see a lot of even I think the archaeological from ASI only called Dr. VK Rao or something from Karnataka only. He said there is actually beneath another temple only which was destroyed or because of maybe natural causes or something. So I thought you were trying to show that one, that there is a
No, no,
structure
no.
and not foundation.
No, not really, not really. It is not the structure that I was trying to show. It is the foundation. This is,
Okay.
the concerns talking about, the indirect protection and direct protection that we can do for the structure
Okay.
for Taj Mahal. Like, the direct would be the preservation and other techniques. Indirect would be to clean up the Yamuna and allow the river to hold the structure.
Okay, okay. Dhanyawad.
So thanks a lot again to all of you.
I have a question. I have a question.
Yeah,
Yes.
please.
If you permit me, then I am going to ask. May I, ma'am?
Yes, please.
There, further, we have several other architectural heritages outside India. For example, in Afghanistan as well as in further Pakistan, they are destroyed there. What our government is doing in that particular direction? For example, we know when further Taliban came into power, Bahman was destroyed. At the same time, further museums were destroyed. Whether we as an Indian government is taking any particular active step to save our, because it is our heritage in one way or other, we cannot deny that further it is not our heritage. Are we taking any steps in that direction?
With
Honestly,
your
sir.
permission, Sindhuji, just a
Yes,
minute.
sir.
With your permission, when I was working in Delhi at that time, I want to say that UNESCO tried a lot to save these all monuments, but in this rule of this hukum shahi, we can't do anything. जब हुकुम शाह एक बार तय कर लेते हैं और वो अपनी इलाके में जब बमबारी करते हैं, उस समय वहां जाकर के कोई उसको ये नहीं कर सकता है. इट्स द फैक्ट. और इंडिया क्या कर रही है उस समय, कल्चरल मिनिस्ट्री गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया ने इसके बारे में यूनेस्को के साथ पत्र व्यवहार किया था, उन्होंने भी इसके बारे में किया था, बट खुद यूनो या यूनेस्को इस लेवल तक कि वो कुछ नहीं कर पाते, क्योंकि वो जिस मेंटालिटी करते हैं तो उस समय कुछ नहीं हो सकता है। तब जितना पॉसिबल है वो लोग कोशिश की, बट एक हद के आगे वो भी कुछ नहीं कर पाते।
Actually, I would like to bring it to your notice that we have this shloka, right? Namaste Sharada Devi Kashmira Puravasini. So, which means that it belongs to us. It is there in our land. But in reality, in the physical constraints of geographical division, it is now it now belongs to Pakistan, and we don't have the accessibility for that temple. So Sharda Devi cannot be, reached by us. Unfortunate. I mean, these are the things that is created by man. We are responsible for this, inaccessibility in a way.
And now this is our conservation process session is here. So I request to all of you that please be careful for to ask the questions which are not related with the session. Afterwards, in the last session, we can conclude all types of questions, no problem for it. So with the kind permission of all of you, we will stop here because time is 2 more.
Sure.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks a lot, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
धन्यवाद।